Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really plunging into a book that, well, it sticks with you, Imre Kertész's Fatelessness. And it's not just a novel, right? It's drawn from his own life, his time as a teenager in concentration camps. Our mission really is to kind of pull out the key insights from the perspective of the young narrator, Gyuri. It's this incredibly detached viewpoint. What does that unique lens show us about things like fate, freedom, identity, when everything's pushed to the absolute extreme?
Exactly. And this deep dive, it gives us this rare chance to look at survival differently. Not through the usual story of suffering we expect, maybe, but through these tiny, sometimes baffling observations of a kid just trying to make sense of it all. We'll see how, the everyday stuff and the absolute horror just kind of blend together. It really forces you to rethink things.
Okay, let's unpack Gyuri's journey then. It kicks off in Budapest, 1944. The yellow star is right there, inescapable. And what hits you immediately is alone. It's a source of amusement.
It's quite jarring, isn't it? It shows this sort of immediate mental adjustment people were making, trying to normalize the completely abnormal.
That observation sets the tone perfectly, I think. It's not just the siddle of being oppressed. For Gyuri, it's something he's trying to just fit into his regular life. It shows this early, almost dispassionate way he adapts, really signals his unique way of processing these huge societal changes. Right. And then his father is preparing for labor service, and you see the whole society just sort of grappling. His family members have these wildly different ways of coping. You've got his father and stepmother worrying about business accounts, transferring things to Mr. Suit, even arguing about whether a receipt has practical value. It seems almost absurd. And then on the other side, there's Uncle Willie, the ex-journalist, talking about secret negotiations and Jews being pawns. And then Uncle Lajos, he brings in this idea of a shared Jewish fate, divine punishment. And he asks Gyuri if he prayed for his father. Gyuri admits the thought would never have occurred to me.
Yeah, that clash is so central to how Kertész tells the story. It shows the human mind desperately trying to fit something incomprehensible into boxes it knows, like business logic or grand political theories or, religious fate. The absurdity of worrying about a receipt in the middle of all that. It says so much about trying to keep hold of some kind of order. And Gyuri's reaction about prayer, it shows his perspective, still developing, before the full weight really hits him.
And pretty soon, Gyuri himself gets assigned to labor service. So he goes from watching his dad's fate to living his own. He gets these legitimate identity papers that let him cross a border, something seen as a privilege because others with the star couldn't travel. His stepmother is apparently thrilled about the papers. But then the local baker, who hates Jews, shorts him on bread, and Gyuri understands this as the baker being guided by the justice of an ideal. I mean, that's an incredibly twisted idea of privilege and justice, right?
Absolutely. Kertész just lays the irony bare, a privilege that comes from the system crushing you. And the baker. That's chilling, too. It shows how prejudice isn't just like a feeling. It becomes a whole rationale. People build these twisted logics to justify themselves. It's a powerful look at those mental gymnastics people do to feel right in a world gone wrong.
So the journey takes this incredibly dark turn. Gyuri ends up with other boys at Auschwitz-Birkenau. And what's so disturbing about how he describes arriving isn't just chaos. It's this weird mix of super organized procedure and total confusion. He even describes the German soldiers as smart and trim, the sole anchors of solidity and calm in the whole tumult. And he watches the selection, the doctor pointing left or right. Gyuri says it felt like everything functioning, precisely, cheerfully, in a well-oiled fashion. What does that focus on normalcy amidst horror tell us about the camp's psychological effect?
That's exactly it. Kertész just flips what we expect. The real horror isn't only the obvious cruelty, it's this perverse order. Gyuri's detachment, observing it almost like an anthropologist, it shows this complete moral inversion. Even a doctor who seems sympathetic is just a cog in this machine of extermination. It's a deep insight into how evil can just become functional, normalized. He's not seeing chaos, he's seeing a system, which somehow makes it even worse.
And the dehumanization ramps up fast. The bathhouse scene, valuables taken, all hair shaved off. Gyuri notes the loss of his body hair pained me even more than that of the hair on my head, but then dismisses it. Ridiculous for me to get hung up over such a trifle. They even start joking, calling someone fancy man. This dark humor, this rapid adaptation, it's happening even as the reality of the camp, what it's for, starts seeping in bit by bit.
Yes, it highlights that human capacity for, gallows humor, maybe. And adaptation, even when facing the absolute worst. The way the truth about the gas chambers comes out gradually. First, that sweetish, cloying chemical smell. It underscores how insidious it all was. It allows for a kind of mental processing that might just break you if it hit all at once. When he finally learns how it works, he calls it crafty, like a kind of student prank. It's a chillingly detached way to cope, isn't it? And the tattoo. A Himmel telephone number. A celestial telephone number. Grim humor again, about the only call you could make.
Then he's moved to Zeitz, a smaller, mediocre camp. Juri settles into another distorted routine. You get these glimpses of dark humor again, like the joke about the U on a prisoner's triangle, meaning unschuldig, innocent, instead of ungar for Hungarian. But that exists right alongside the brutality. The Lagerel tester, the prisoner in charge, marked as a murderer. And you start seeing the physical cost, his friends getting thinner, jaundiced, the eyes even a touch larger and more feverish. What does this weird mix of jokes and decline tell us about surviving there?
It shows this desperate need for any kind of agency. Even if it's just a dark joke, that innocent joke, it's a tiny way to push back against the randomness of it all, to assert something about yourself. But seeing his friends waste away, that juxtaposition shows the relentless physical and psychological grind. It's about enduring both.
Then a really brutal beating sends Juri to the camp hospital in Glyna. And weirdly, it's a kind of break for him. He finds a bed, no roll call, no work. He actually gets medical care for his leg from this kindly-looking doctor. But what's really unsettling is finding out this doctor has been in camps for 12 years. 12 Jahre an Lager. Another doctor, just 6 years. And when they ask Juri why he was arrested, and he says, basically, for being Jewish, I'd done nothing. For the same simple reason as others of my race, they're astonished. They actually felt sorry for me. That's just a bizarre situation, isn't it?
It's profoundly disturbing. Yeah, it really highlights that moral inversion we talked about. Professional medical care happening inside a system built for death. The doctors having been there so long and being surprised by Juri's innocent arrest, it suggests this chilling normalization of the horror. They're insulated from outside reality. They become part of this completely distorted moral world where basic rights are just alien concepts. And later you hear about Juri being essentially sold to a German prominent, a privileged prisoner. It just hammers home how human lives became commodities.
So as things outside the hospital start falling apart, the camp rhythm changes, ominous signs, rumors of impending changes, then orders over the intercom. Crematorium ausmachen. Shut down the crematorium, then alle Juden in Lager sofort. All Jews report immediately. There's a scene where a boy with a gunshot wound gets sent nach house, back to his block, not home, and he's so grateful he hugs the doctor's legs and the doctor hits him. The tension builds to this altogether too great a hush, and then the Lagerl tester announces, choking up, Kameraden, you sind free, comrades, we are free. What does that boy's reaction, being grateful to go back to his block, tell us about hope and fear right at the end?
It's such a poignant moment. It shows how totally warped the idea of good fortune had become. For that boy, going home to his block, even injured, was maybe known, predictable, safer than the terrifying unknown of liberation. It just highlights how the definitions of safety, freedom, everything were completely twisted. And Juri's focus, even then, stays so practical. That's really key to understanding him later.
Freedom arrives. But for Juri, it's not this big emotional release. There are speeches, people celebrating. But Juri, he's absolutely delighted, mainly because he notices nobody mentioned the missing soup. His actual relief only comes when the laudral tester gets the potato peelers back to work to make a strong goulash soup. That detail is just wow.
It's incredibly powerful. Yeah. It shows that fundamental shift in priorities when you're under extreme stress. Juri's focus on food, not abstract freedom, highlights the raw, visceral reality of survival. It's proof of how basic needs just take over your consciousness, even at huge historical moments. A real counterpoint to all the liberation speeches.
So he gets home. And the world wants answers, wants to categorize it, wants him to move on. But his experience just doesn't fit. He's physically changed, conspicuously low forehead, facial swelling, a limp. Someone asks if he saw gas chambers, and he just says, if I had, we wouldn't be standing around talking now. His relatives tell him, put the horrors behind you so you can live freely. But Juri says, I didn't notice any atrocities. He explains that in the camp, things that seem unnatural outside just become natural there. He describes the Auschwitz selection as just taking steps. Everyone took steps. I, too, took my own steps. This is really the start of that gap, that chasm between experience and understanding, isn't it?
Absolutely. The outside world needs to label it horror and understand it in familiar terms. But that clashes completely with the survivor's reality, which can't be neatly packaged. Juri's steps idea is crucial. It's his framework for how the unbearable was actually born one small action at a time. For him, survival wasn't some grand story of heroism or victimhood. It was just taking the next step. And that perspective challenges the tidy narratives people wanted.
Which leads to his most challenging argument, really, about fate and freedom, redefining victimhood itself. He says, if there is such a thing as fate, then freedom is not possible. But then, if there is such a thing as freedom, then we ourselves are fate. His relatives are outraged, so we're the guilty ones, us, the victims. But Jury says it's not about crime, it's about admitting something. Meekly, simply. A point of honor. He insists, I could not swallow that idiotic bitterness that I should merely be innocent.
This really probes deep questions about agency, maybe even complicity, in huge traumas. Jury refusing to be just an innocent victim. Instead, seeing himself as an active participant in his given fate. That's profound. And challenging. He's not trying to blame anyone, I don't think. He's trying to find a kind of dignity and understanding of his own experience, even if that means acknowledging a shared human condition that allowed it all. He rejects being just a passive victim. It forces us, the readers, you, the listener, to rethink choice in those extreme situations.
And the book wraps up with this journalist wanting his story, wants to write about the hell of the camps. But Jerry just says, I have nothing at all to say about that, as I was not acquainted with hell. He calls a concentration camp a place where it is impossible to become bored because time helps. He explains that if you knew everything all at once, at one fell swoop, your brain, your heart just couldn't handle it. He turns down the money, throws away the contact info. He can't, or maybe won't, tell his truth in the way the world wants to hear it.
And that's the final paradox Kertész leaves us wrestling with, isn't it? The survivor's experience is so internal, so processed piece by piece, it becomes almost impossible to communicate fully to anyone who wasn't there. Jury's refusal to give the expected hell narrative isn't him denying what happened. It's a testament to how his mind integrated it all. His understanding of time, boredom, the slow drip feed of horror, that's his truth. And it fundamentally clashes with the neat, emotional stories the rest of the world wants.
What an incredible book. An extraordinary journey, really, and such a uniquely unsettling viewpoint on one of history's darkest times. Yuri's refusal to fit the mold, the expected narratives of victim or hero, his insistence on the sort of gradual, almost mundane unfolding of his fatelessness, it leaves you with a lot to think about. It really challenges our assumptions.
It really does. This book forces us to witness not just the events, but the subjective experience of them. It shows uncomfortable truths, doesn't it, about how adaptable humans are, how a deceptive normalcy can take root anywhere, and how incredibly hard it is to bridge the gap between lived reality and outside understanding.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Maybe think about how our own ideas of good and evil, fate, freedom, how they might bend or break when faced with an account like this. What does it actually mean to be innocent when you're forced to just keep taking steps in a world that's fundamentally unjust? And how do we, maybe in our own lives, balance that need we have for understanding with the fact that some experiences are just profoundly personal, maybe even fundamentally unknowable from the outside?